With the conquest of Earth in full swing, Zeon began to rapidly convert their Zakus for specific regions. But while the Zaku was able to do very well under gravity, it didn't perform so well underwater. The Zaku Marine type had poor underwater mobility, and its waterproof joints weren't waterproof. Two very important things for an amphibious machine. Still, 5 initial trial units were made, and later on an additional 2 would also be made. And while they weren't successful as combat units, they would provide Zeon with important data. And with this data, Zemad would be the first to see success. Rather than putting all of their eggs in one basket, they were working on 2 different machines, leading to an internal competition. And the first one of these 2 was the MSM-02 Hydro test type. Although it stuck close to the design of the Zaku, the unit was made more streamlined and was outfitted with hydrojets, resulting in an improvement of its underwater capabilities by about 10 to 20%. Its reactor then was borrowed from the Dom and would be cooled using seawater, another big improvement for the Hydro test type. And finally, its weapons were also better, consisting of 2 6-tube missile launchers mounted on the shoulders, 2 6-barreled Vulcan guns mounted on the forearms, 2 pop-up 70mm Vulcan pods on the backpack, and 4 anti-air/anti-ship missiles also mounted on the backpack. It was also planned to be outfitted with beam weapons, but for unknown reasons, these plans never materialized. But while the Hydro test type laid a foundation for future marine mobile suits, it unfortunately did not succeed. Its on-land performance was lower than expected, and it failed to meet the requirements set by the Zeon High Command. Because of this, it would lose out to Zemad's other machine, the Gogg. But not before a few units would be produced. Most likely because at the time, it was either this machine or nothing. And then once the Gogg was ready for mass production, they immediately shifted over. But before we talk more about that amazing machine, I first want to tell you about this video's sponsor, FX Creations and their official RX-78 themed apparel. They put a stylish spin on the traditional tricolor color scheme, making for some really cool things. First up, we have the AGS Pro Suspension Backpack, which makes use of their signature anti-gravity system. By using a sturdy spring, the backpack can absorb the shocks from walking, so it's like movable frame technology for your back. And in addition to being comfortable, it's also got a lot of space, so I can easily fit in my laptop, tablet, high-grade Hazel, Gunpla tools, PS Vita, and I've still got room left over for more. Like this bifold wallet made out of genuine leather. It'll hold my debit and credit cards, all of my cash, both notes and coins, and most importantly, my old chunky driver's license that I will not change as long as I don't have to. And for even more card storage, there's also this bifold card holder. It's got one transparent holder on the outside, which is perfect for something like a Pasmo or a Suica, and then 7 on the inside. And just like the bifold wallet, it is made out of genuine leather, and it has a really nice laser engraved metal plaque with RX-78 on it. And finally, we have the waist bag, which really reminds me of the RX-78's front skirt armor. And while it might be compact, it comes with a whopping 7 different compartments for maximum storage, while also keeping things organized. It's made out of water-repellent material, and with the extra crossbody strap, you can also wear it over the shoulder in addition to using it as a sling bag or a traditional waist bag. You can check out everything they have on offer with the link down below, and if you use the coupon code KAKAROT, you'll also get a 5% discount. The Gogg then first saw the light of day as the MSM-03 prototype Gogg, a unit with heavy armor to withstand the pressure of the deep sea, and the first Zeon mobile suit to be armed with a mega particle cannon. This unit was built inside of a colony, and while they were able to do some underwater testing, the waters inside of a colony were of course still very different from the depths of the oceans on Earth. So as soon as they could, they shipped it out to Earth for further testing, where several problems then would come to light. First of all, the megaparticle cannons weren't as effective as they thought when used underwater, so a secondary ranged weapon would be needed for underwater combat. The proposed solution was a torpedo pod that could be attached to the lower arms, but before this could be implemented, another problem was discovered, this time with the arms. They couldn't handle the water pressure at the required depth for long enough, and the solution for this problem was to completely redesign them. They were going to make them retractable into the thick shoulder armor. So instead of a traditional structure, the engineers now developed something that is called the bellows armor, which would allow the arm to scrunch together, just like a bellows, and the shoulders then would get a special double-jointed structure that would allow part of the arm to withdraw into the torso. This would then protect them from the water pressure while cruising, but did of course also mean that that torpedo pod idea had to be scrapped. Instead, the Gogg would get 2 torpedo tubes in its abdomen next to those megaparticle cannons. What was also changed about the arms was that the fingers were now replaced with the iron nail claws. These were designed to be sharp enough to tear through the bottom of an aircraft carrier, and as a consequence, were also strong enough to damage Luna titanium alloy. What the finalized Gogg then also had, that the prototype didn't, was the Freezy Yard, a gel-like substance that could be launched from the Gogg's head, which would then completely envelop the machine. This gel would then not only make the Gogg harder to pick up on sonar, but it would also protect it from mines and depth charges. The downside though was that the entangled mines still needed to be ditched somehow, and that the gel also blocked the Gogg's water intake, which was of course crucial for cooling its powerful reactor. So despite being very useful, it had to be used sparingly. Still, it would prove to be a great success in breaking through Federation blockades. And the launcher that fired these Freezy Yard rounds could also fire other projectiles like signal flares. What is debated though is its final weapon. In the anime, we see the Gogg firing 2 megaparticle cannons that are mounted on the side of its head, but these are never mentioned as part of its weaponry in any source that I'm aware of. So as a result, it is sometimes depicted with these cannons and sometimes without these cannons. On land then, things were slightly less good, but still within acceptable parameters. Like I just said, the Gogg's reactor relied on water for cooling, and this was especially true when it used its megaparticle cannons. So for combat on land, it had ballast tanks for cooling water that granted it about 1 to 2 hours of combat time. The real downside then was its lack of mobility due to the heavy weight and the structure of the legs. These were built first and foremost for underwater performance with thermonuclear hydrojet engines. But this lack of mobility was compensated by its strong armor. The Gogg was greenlit for mass production in March and would prove to be a key player in Zeon's amphibious assaults, and it would be mainly active in the Mediterranean Sea and the Gulf of Mexico. When the newer designs became available then, the Gogg would be slowly phased out, and by the end of the war, Zermatt had completely overhauled it as part of the United Maintenance Plan. A plan that aimed to introduce standard parts for the slew of different machines that Zeon was using, therefore facilitating both their production and their repairs. Most machines that were designed for this plan were modifications of their base versions, but for the Gogg, Zermatt decided that the design was simply too archaic. By the time of the United Maintenance Plan, the Gogg was considered to be a first-generation amphibious mobile suit, whereas newer machines like the Agi and the Zygog were considered second-generation amphibious mobile suits. So instead, the Gogg was completely redesigned, and the new Hygogg only kept its general shape and idea. Thanks to advances in technology, it was both lighter and more powerful, resulting in an on-land performance that was almost unrecognizable from the original Gogg. In terms of weapons then, during its combat deployments, it was discovered that the Gogg and the Zygog worked very well together, so to further capitalize on this, its weapons were slightly changed. It now has 4 torpedo tubes, which can also be used for anti-surface or anti-air missiles, 2 120mm machine guns that are installed in the abdomen and fire the same bullets as the standard Zoggo machine gun, a beam cannon on each arm, which are powered by ECAP technology and have a high rate of fire, making them very useful in close combat, Vice Claws, which are an improved version of the Iron Nails and can also grab onto things, like an enemy mobile suit to be used as a shield, and 2 missile hand units. These missiles are stored on the beam cannons and are covered with a mantle to reduce water resistance during travel. When the missile is fired then, the cover opens up and is blown away. The Hygogg would prove to be an extremely successful design, especially in combination with the Zygog E. And quite a few of these units would apparently be made, but it was their deployment that was rather limited. Presumably because by the time of its deployment, Zeon was on the defensive and withdrawing from Earth, leaving very little use for an amphibious assault machine. Despite this though, an upgraded version appears in the Mobile Suit Voa manga by Kazuhisa Kondo, the MSM-03Cbis Hygog. The only difference seems to be that its armor is more streamlined and only one unit is known to have existed, which participated in an operation to destroy an important Federation oil field in the North Sea. During the Battle of Jobro then, a unit appeared that looked like an in-between variant of the Gogg and the Hygogg. This unnamed variant has a body resembling that of the standard Gogg, but has the arms and the shoulder armor of the Hygogg. It fought alongside a Joagu Kai, but both were destroyed during the battle. After the 1-year war then, several Zermatt engineers would use the data of the Gogg and the Hygogg to create Neo Zeon's next generation amphibious mobile suit. And the combination of these two fearsome mobile suits was the Kapool. I think the Hygogg might have cheated on the Gogg with a ball though. All kidding aside, it did have a lot of good things to offer. Its rotund body was streamlined and also well armored. It had good underwater mobility, it could transform into a high-speed cruising mode, and it was maybe even usable in space. And its weapons were also nothing to scoff at. For close combat, it had iron nails that were capable of ripping through Gundarium alloy, and for ranged combat, it had 8 missile launchers on its body, a water-cooled sonic blast megaparticle cannon on its abdomen, and a head-mounted laser beam. This laser was also nicknamed the I-beam because it was located in the cockpit hatch above the mono-eye, and despite its relatively low power, the Kapool's own mono-eye had to be shielded when firing it because otherwise it could be damaged. But yeah, overall, the Kapool seemed to be a very formidable mobile suit. There was only one problem. Because the Kapool was developed on Axis, its developers of course only had, let's say, minimal opportunities to test it out in deep water before its deployment. So as a result, many Neo Zeon soldiers were wary of the machine and preferred to give it to their allies, while they themselves opted for the more tried and tested Zoggo Mariner, despite that thing being a Federation mobile suit. Still, The Capule would prove itself in the coming battles, and was even able to do something during the events of Gundam Unicorn. In Hero Senki Project Olympus for the Super Famicom then, 2 upgraded Capules would also appear, although both of them apparently looked identical to the base model. There was the Capule Mark II, with improved specs, which was then further enhanced into the Capule Woge. According to the Japanese pages talking about this thing, Woge means big wave in German, but according to every German dictionary that I was able to find, it's just a normal wave. Another almost identical unit then would appear many millennia later, the Capule, but now spelled differently. From the line art, or even the pronunciation, it would be hard to distinguish the Capule from the Capule, but these newer Capules were 2.5 meters shorter than the original Capule. So either they were like later reconstructions of the original unit, or perhaps they were actually that Capule Mark II or the Capule Woge, because their data only says that they look identical to the original Capule. They don't say anything about their size. But whatever the case might be, these new Capules were excavated by the Inglese militia and quickly became an important part of their mobile suit forces, and were affectionately nicknamed Balls. The weapons then also remained largely the same in terms of what was installed on the machine, but due to the technological regression of the time, some changes were made. The Capule still had its laser beam and sonic blast, but for some reason these were never used. Maybe these were broken and the Inglese militia simply didn't have the tech to fix them, or maybe they didn't even know how to charge these, or maybe there was another reason entirely. The A2 missile launcher then would still see use, but instead of the standard issue missiles of the original Capule, it would now be outfitted with whatever explosives the militia had. In the anime, this was rockets, and in the novel, they even used them as storage for grenades and artillery shells. The iron nails remained the same, but it was here that a new weapon of the Capule would be mounted. A triple-barreled conventional gun called the handgun. For heavier firepower then, it could use an anti-aircraft cannon, and later on it was even seen using the Gundam hammer. And while these modifications didn't make the Capule a match for the Moon Race's full-sized mobile suits, it did perform admirably against their smaller mobile suits. And while that might not sound like a fantastic feat at first, I wasn't joking that these machines popped up millennia, plural, later. The original Capules were used at least 2 millennia before these new Capules, and potentially even over 3 millennia. So, you know, good on them. Oh, and remember when I said that the original Capules were maybe usable in space? Well, that's because these bad boys were definitely usable in space. And there were also 2 customized versions of the Capule that we know of. There was a construction version with crane-like arms, and the Corin Nander custom. Piloted by Corin Nander, this Capule had its right arm replaced with a modified Wadom hand. The modification being thrusters to allow it to pull off a rocket punch. Because why not? And of course, it also allowed the Corin Nander custom to wield handheld equipment, like its signature Minchi drill, which was first used on the E-Gale. This mace-esque contraption was modified from mining equipment and can be used to either bludgeon, drill, or cut anything unfortunate enough to be in its way. And of course, in true Commander fashion, the machine was painted in red, and later on also given a Commander antenna. And this is where the Gogg's development history ends for now. It was one of the first mobile suits to appear, and its descendants also managed to be some of the last mobile suits to still see combat. So talk about an impressive combat record. So don't forget to check out FX Creations and their RX-72 collection with the link down below. As always, a big thank you to the Patreon supporters. I hope everyone watching has a great day, and I'll see you all next time.